Tyler had been planning this camping trip for weeks. He'd marked it on his calendar, bought new hiking boots, and even watched YouTube videos about setting up camp. His friend Mia from college had agreed to come along, and he wanted everything to be perfect. They'd been study buddies for almost 2 years now, meeting at the library every Tuesday and Thursday. To tackle their chemistry assignments together, the thing about Tyler and Mia was that they had this comfortable friendship that everyone else seemed to notice more than they did. Their classmates would make jokes about when they were going to start dating, but both of them would just laugh it off. Tyler had caught himself staring at Mia during their study sessions more times than he cared to admit, especially when she'd scrunch up her nose while working through difficult problems. But he'd never said anything, neither had she. The plan was simple enough. Drive up to Pine Ridge Trail on Friday afternoon, set up camp, spend Saturday hiking, and drive back Sunday morning. Tyler had camped plenty of times with his dad growing up, so he figured he had everything under control. Mia had never been camping before, but she was always up for trying new things. That's what Tyler liked about her. She never backed down from a challenge. Friday morning started perfectly. Tyler loaded his truck with what he thought was everything they'd need. Tent, check. Sleeping bags, check. Well, at least he thought he'd grabbed both sleeping bags from the garage. His dad had 2 of them hanging on hooks next to the camping gear. Tyler remembered reaching for them, but he'd been rushing because he was already running late to pick up Mia. Mia was waiting outside her apartment building with a bright blue backpack that looked brand new. She'd bought it specifically for this trip, along with hiking boots that still had the tags on them that morning. She climbed into Tyler's truck with a huge smile, clearly excited about her first real outdoor adventure. "I've been watching camping videos all week," she said, buckling her seatbelt. "Did you know you're supposed to hang your food in a tree so bears don't get it?" Tyler laughed. "Don't worry, there aren't really any bears up where we're going." Drive took longer than expected. It should have been a 3-hour trip turned into nearly 5 hours because of construction on the main highway. They had to take back roads that wound through small mountain towns Tyler had never heard of. But neither of them minded. They talked about their upcoming finals, argued about which professor was the toughest, and played silly road trip games like counting red cars. By the time they reached the trailhead, the sun was already getting low in the sky. Tyler checked his phone one last time before they lost signal. No bars. They really were going to be cut off from the world for the next 2 days. The hike to their campsite was supposed to take an hour, but it took them almost 2. Mia had to stop frequently to catch her breath those new hiking boots were giving her blisters, and she wasn't used to carrying a heavy pack. Tyler didn't mind the slower pace, gave him more time to point out different trees and birds, playing the role of wilderness guide even though he was probably making half of it up. When they finally reached the clearing that would be their campsite, Tyler immediately started unloading his pack. He wanted to get the tent set up before it got completely dark. That's when he made the discovery that would change their entire weekend. "Hey, Mia," he called out, his voice sounding strange. "Did you bring a sleeping bag?" She looked up from where she was sitting on a log, trying to adjust her boots. "No, you said you were handling all the camping gear, remember? I just brought clothes and snacks." Tyler stared down at his pack. There was definitely only one sleeping bag, a compact mummy-style bag that his dad used for solo trips. It was designed for one person and barely looked big enough for Tyler's 6-foot frame, let alone 2 people. The temperature was already dropping. Tyler could see his breath when he exhaled, and the sun was disappearing behind the mountains faster than he'd expected. According to his weather app, which he'd checked before losing signal, the overnight low was going to be around 30 degrees. It was cold enough to be dangerous if you weren't prepared. Mia walked over and looked at the single sleeping bag. She was quiet for a moment, and Tyler could practically see her mind working through the problem. She was always logical like that, even in stressful situations. "Okay," she said finally. "What are our options here?" Tyler ran through every possibility he could think of. He could sleep outside the tent and let Mia have the sleeping bag, but that would probably mean risking hypothermia. They could take turns switching every few hours, but neither of them would get any real sleep that way. They could try to hike back to the truck in the dark, but the trail was tricky even in daylight, and they didn't have proper flashlights. Or, Mia said, her cheeks turning pink in the cold air, we could share it. I mean, people do that in survival situations, right? Body heat and all that. Tyler felt his heart skip. The thought of being that close to Mia was both exciting and terrifying. He'd imagined it plenty of times during their study sessions, but always pushed those thoughts away. It might be their only safe option. As they set up the tent in the fading light, Tyler couldn't stop thinking about how this had happened. If he'd just been more careful that morning, if he'd double-checked his gear, they'd left earlier and had time to drive back to town. But there was no changing it now. Mia seemed surprisingly calm about the whole situation. She helped him stake down the tent and organize their supplies with the same methodical approach she used for chemistry problems. But Tyler noticed she kept glancing at that single sleeping bag, and her cheeks stayed pink even after they'd warmed up from setting up camp. They made a simple dinner on Tyler's camping stove, instant noodles that tasted amazing in the crisp mountain air. As they ate, they could see stars starting to appear overhead, more stars than either of them had ever seen before. Under different circumstances, it would have been perfectly romantic. You know what's funny? Mia said, stirring her noodles. I was actually nervous about this trip. Nervous about camping, nervous about spending a whole weekend alone with you, she admitted. I thought it might be weird. Tyler nearly choked on his food. Weird how? I don't know. We've never really hung out outside of school before. Wasn't sure if we'd have enough to talk about. Looking back, Tyler would realize this was the moment when things started to shift between them. Not the sleeping bag situation, but this honest conversation under the stars. The moment when they both admitted that their friendship meant more to them than just studying together. As the temperature continued to drop, they couldn't put off the inevitable any longer. They were going to have to figure out how to share that tiny sleeping bag and somehow make it through the night without freezing or making things awkward between them. Little did they know, this camping disaster was about to become the best thing that ever happened to their friendship. The cold hit them fast. One minute they were sitting by their little camping stove feeling okay, and the next minute Tyler could see his breath every time he spoke. Mia had started shivering, even though she was trying to hide it by keeping her hands wrapped around her warm cup of instant hot chocolate. Tyler pulled out his phone to check the weather app one more time, even though he knew there was no signal. The last forecast he'd seen before they lost connection showed the temperature dropping to 28 degrees. That was below freezing. That was dangerous cold if you weren't prepared for it. How cold do you think it's getting? Mia asked, pulling her thin fleece jacket tighter around herself. Tyler didn't want to worry her, but he couldn't lie either. Pretty cold, probably close to freezing. He watched as Mia looked down at her outfit. She'd packed for a fun weekend camping trip, not a survival situation. Her fleece was more for style than warmth, and her jeans were already feeling stiff. From the cold air, she'd brought a pair of pajamas to sleep in, but they were just thin cotton pants and a t-shirt. Tyler started going through every possible solution in his head. He was good at problem solving. It's what made him a decent chemistry student, but this wasn't a chemistry problem with a clear answer in the back of the textbook. Okay, he said, trying to sound more confident than he felt. First option, Tyler could sleep outside the tent and let Mia have the sleeping bag. But even as he suggested it, he knew it was a terrible idea. Ground was already cold enough that he could feel it through his hiking boots. Sleeping directly on it for 8 hours could lead to hypothermia, especially if the temperature dropped as low as the forecast predicted. Absolutely not, Mia said immediately. I'm not letting you risk getting seriously hurt just because we made a packing mistake. Second option, they could take turns with a sleeping bag, a few hours each, switching throughout the night. But Tyler had been camping enough times to know that wouldn't work either. Neither of them would get any real sleep, and they'd both end up exhausted and cold. That's almost as bad as the first idea, Mia pointed out. We'd both be miserable. And we still have that long hike back tomorrow. Third option, they could pack up right now and try to hike back to the truck in the dark. Tyler had brought a small flashlight, and Mia had the flashlight app on her phone. Though her battery was already getting low, Tyler thought about the trail they'd hiked that afternoon. There were several places where the path was narrow, with steep drops on one side. There were rocks and roots that would be easy to trip over in the dark. And there was that one section where the trail markers were spaced pretty far apart. They'd actually gotten turned around for a few minutes even. In daylight, I don't think that's safe, Tyler said. The trail was tricky enough during the day. Mia nodded. She'd been thinking the same thing. Plus, my feet are already pretty torn up from these new boots. I don't think I could make it all the way back. Tonight, they sat in silence for a moment, both knowing there was really only one option left. The option that made Tyler's heart race and his palms sweat despite the cold air. So, Mia said quietly, that leaves sharing the sleeping bag. Tyler looked at the small mummy-style sleeping bag again. It was designed for one person. Meant to be compact and lightweight for solo backpacking trips. It would be a tight fit for him alone. With both of them in it, they'd have to be pressed right up against each other. Are you okay with that? Tyler asked. I mean, I know it's not exactly what either of us planned for this weekend. Mia was quiet for a long moment. Tyler could see her thinking it through, probably running through the same mental calculations he was. The risks of the alternatives versus the awkwardness of sharing such a small space. It's not like we have much choice, she said finally. Or not. It's not like we're strangers. We've been friends for almost 2 years, but Tyler knew it wasn't quite that simple. Sure, they were friends, but they'd never been in any situation even close to this intimate. The closest they'd ever been was sitting next to each other at those library tables. And even then, Tyler had been hyper-aware of every time their elbows accidentally touched. The temperature kept dropping. Mia's shivering was getting worse, and Tyler could feel the cold starting to seep through his jacket too. They needed to make a decision and get inside the tent before things got even worse. I've been reading about survival techniques while you were setting up the tent, Mia said, pulling out her phone. She'd been using what little battery she had left to research their situation. According to this article, the key is maximizing skin contact for heat transfer. Tyler felt his face get hot despite the cold air. Skin contact. Not like that, Mia said quickly, though her cheeks were turning red too. Just, arms and legs. The article says you should wear as few layers as possible inside the sleeping bag because fabric actually insulates against shared body heat. Tyler tried to process this information while fighting the urge to panic. He'd imagined being close to Mia plenty of times, but never in a situation like this. Never out of necessity rather than choice. The article also says the taller person should be the outside spoon, Mia continued, reading from her phone screen. Something about heat distribution and body coverage. Outside spoon? Tyler repeated. Like... Mia made a vague gesture with her hands. Like spoons in a drawer? One person curves around the other person's back. The reality of their situation was starting to sink in. They weren't just going to share a sleeping bag, they were going to have to hold each other all night long. Tyler's mind was racing with a million thoughts and worries. What if he couldn't sleep? What if Mia couldn't sleep? What if things got weird between them? What if this ruined their friendship? But looking at Mia, who was now shivering so hard, she could barely hold her phone steady. Tyler realized that none of those worries mattered as much as keeping her safe and warm. Okay, he said. If that's what we need to do to get through the night safely, then that's what we'll do. Mia smiled at him, and Tyler was surprised to see that she looked relieved rather than nervous. Thanks for being so understanding about this whole mess. Thanks for not freaking out about my terrible packing skills. They both laughed, and some of the tension seemed to ease. But as they looked at that tiny sleeping bag again, Tyler knew the real test was still ahead of them. By 9 o'clock, they couldn't put it off any longer. The cold was getting serious now, and Mia's teeth were actually chattering when she talked. Tyler could feel the chill seeping through his jacket and into his bones. They needed to get inside that tent and figure out how to make this work. Okay, Tyler said, trying to sound casual about the whole situation. Guess we should probably get ready for bed. They both stood there for a moment, neither one quite sure how to handle this next part. It wasn't like they could just climb into the sleeping bag in their hiking clothes. Everything was dirty from the day's hike, and more importantly, all those layers would actually make them colder once they were sharing body heat. I'll go first, Mia said, grabbing her backpack. Give me 5 minutes to change. She disappeared into the tent, and Tyler could hear her moving around inside, the sound of zippers and rustling fabric. He tried not to think too hard about what was happening in there. Instead, he focused on organizing their food supplies and making sure everything was secure for the night. When Mia called out that she was done, Tyler grabbed his own change of clothes and crawled into the tent. She was sitting in the corner with her back turned, wearing thermal underwear and thick wool socks. Her hair was pulled back in a messy bun, and she had her arms wrapped around her knees. "Your turn," she said without looking at him. Tyler changed. As quickly as possible, pulling on his own thermal layer and warm socks. The tent was small enough that he had to be careful not to bump into Mia while he was getting dressed. He could feel the awkwardness in the air, thick as the cold mountain air outside. When he was done changing, they both sat there looking at the sleeping bag stretched out between them. Tyler had unzipped it completely and laid it flat, thinking. They could figure out the best way to arrange themselves, so Mia said, her voice sounding a little shaky. "How do we do this?" Tyler remembered what she'd read on her phone earlier. The taller person should be the outside spoon, she'd said. That meant Tyler would be curled around Mia's back, his arm probably draped over her waist. The thought made his heart pound. "I guess I lie down first," Tyler said. "Then you can get comfortable, and we'll pull the sleeping bag over both of us." It sounded simple enough when he said it out loud, but actually doing it was completely different. Tyler lay down on his side, trying to take up as little space as possible. The sleeping bag was even smaller than it had looked from the outside. When Mia lay down in front of him, there was barely any room to move. "This is really cozy," Mia said, and Tyler could hear the nervous laugh in her voice. "Hey, cozy," Tyler agreed, though cozy wasn't exactly the word he would have chosen. Intimate, maybe. Overwhelming, definitely. They tried to pull the sleeping bag over themselves, but it was a struggle. Every time one of them moved, they bumped into the other person. Tyler's elbow ended up in Mia's ribs. Mia's hair got caught under Tyler's arm. It was like trying to solve a puzzle while blindfolded. "This isn't working," Mia said, after they'd been wrestling with the sleeping bag for several minutes. She was right. They were both getting frustrated, and they were probably losing more body heat than they were gaining by all the movement and exposed skin. "Let me try something," Tyler said. He sat up and arranged the sleeping bag like a blanket over both of them. Then he lay back down and tried to create a pocket of warm air around them. This position meant they were pressed even closer together. Tyler's chest was against Mia's back, and his arm was definitely around her waist now. He could feel her breathing, could smell her shampoo, could feel the warmth of her body against his. For the first few minutes, they both lay there stiffly, trying to maintain some kind of boundary even in such a small space. Tyler kept his arm as loose as possible around Mia's waist, barely touching her. Mia held herself slightly forward, trying not to lean back into Tyler's chest, but it was impossible to stay comfortable in those positions. Tyler's arm started to cramp from holding it in such an awkward angle. Mia's neck was getting sore from trying to keep her head away from Tyler's shoulder. "This is ridiculous," Mia said finally. "We're both going to end up with permanent muscle damage if we keep trying to avoid touching each other." Tyler had to admit she was right. They were sharing a space designed for one person. There was no way to avoid physical contact, and trying to do so was just making them both miserable. "Maybe we should just try to relax," Tyler said. "I mean, we're friends, right? It's not like this means anything beyond keeping warm." But even as he said it, Tyler knew that wasn't entirely true. Being this close to Mia did mean something to him. He'd been attracted to her for months, and now here they were, pressed together in the most intimate situation they'd ever been in. Mia seemed to relax a little bit after that. She let herself lean back against Tyler's chest, and Tyler allowed his arm to rest more naturally around her waist. It felt better almost immediately, more comfortable and definitely warmer. "Dodge. Your heart is beating really fast," Mia said quietly. Tyler felt his face get hot with embarrassment. Of course she could feel his heartbeat. They were practically sharing the same breathing space. "Sorry," he said. "I guess I'm just nervous about this whole situation." "Me too," Mia admitted. "I keep thinking about how we're going to face each other in chemistry class on Monday after this." Tyler had been thinking the same thing. Would this change their friendship? Would they be able to go back to their normal study sessions and casual conversations? Or would they always remember this night when they looked at each other? "Maybe we're overthinking it," Tyler said. Maybe it'll just be a funny story we tell people someday. Yeah, maybe, Mia said. But Tyler could hear the uncertainty in her voice. They lay there quietly for a while, both lost in their own thoughts. The warmth was definitely working. Tyler could feel the space around them getting cozier, and Mia had stopped shivering, but neither of them seemed able to relax completely. Outside the tent, Tyler could hear the wind picking up, rustling through the trees around their campsite. It made him grateful they weren't trying to sleep outside. Even though this arrangement was more complicated than he'd ever imagined. Tyler, Mia said softly. Yeah. Thanks for not making this weirder than it already is. Tyler smiled even though she couldn't see it. Thanks for being so cool about my terrible planning skills. They both laughed quietly, and Tyler felt some of the tension start to ease. Maybe they really could get through this night without ruining their friendship. Maybe they could just focus on staying warm and safe and worry about everything else tomorrow. Around 10:30, something started to shift between them. Maybe it was the warmth finally settling in, or maybe it was just the reality that they were going to be like this for the next 7 hours. Whatever it was, the awkward tension began to fade, replaced by something Tyler couldn't quite identify. You know what's funny? Mia said, her voice soft in the darkness of the tent. I was actually dreading this weekend a little bit. Tyler was surprised. Really? You seemed excited when we were planning it? I was excited, Mia said, but I was also nervous. We've never really hung out outside of school before. I wasn't sure if we'd have anything to talk about without chemistry homework between us. Tyler had been thinking the same thing during the drive up, but he hadn't wanted to admit it. Their friendship had always revolved around studying together, helping each other with assignments, comparing notes before exams. He'd wondered if that was all they really had in common. And now look at us, Mia continued with a quiet laugh. We definitely have something to talk about. This is probably the weirdest conversation starter in history. Tyler said, and they both started laughing. The laughter seemed to break down another wall between them. Tyler felt Mia relax even more against his chest, and he allowed his arm to settle more comfortably around her. For the first time since they'd gotten into the sleeping bag, it didn't feel forced or awkward. Can I ask you something? Mia said after their laughter had died down. Sure. Why did you invite me on this trip? I mean, really, you could have asked any of your friends from high school or someone from your dorm. Tyler thought about how to answer that. The truth was complicated. He'd wanted to spend time with Mia outside of their study sessions, wanted to see if there was more to their connection than just shared chemistry problems. But he'd never admitted that to himself, let alone to her. I guess I wanted to get to know you better, he said finally. You're always so focused during our study sessions. I wanted to see what you're like when you're not thinking about molecular structures. And what have you discovered so far? Tyler smiled in the darkness. That you're braver than I thought. Most people would have panicked about this whole sleeping bag situation. You just treated it like another problem to solve. That's because I trust you, Mia said simply. Those 4 words hit Tyler harder than he'd expected. I trust you. Coming from Mia, who was always so careful and thoughtful about everything, it meant a lot. I trust you too, Tyler said. I mean, obviously, this would be a lot more uncomfortable than it already is. They fell into a comfortable silence after that. Tyler could hear Mia's breathing starting to even out, and he thought she might be falling asleep. But then she spoke again, her voice even softer than before. Tyler, can I tell you something kind of embarrassing? After tonight, I think we're past the point of worrying about embarrassing things. Mia laughed quietly. Good point. Okay, so you know how we always sit at the same table in the library? Table 12 by the window? Yeah, that's our spot. Well, I started getting there early on Tuesdays and Thursdays just to make sure we got that table. Like really early? Sometimes I'd be there for an hour before you showed up, just doing random homework. Tyler was quiet for a moment, processing this information. Why? Because I liked studying with you. I looked forward to our sessions all week. And I was worried that if we had to sit somewhere else, or if the library was too crowded, maybe you'd suggest we study separately instead. Tyler felt something warm spread through his chest, and it had nothing to do with their shared body. Heat. All this time, he'd thought he was the only one who felt that way about their study sessions. He'd thought he was the only one who looked forward to those Tuesday and Thursday afternoons. I have a confession too, Tyler said.
Oh.
I changed my schedule. Second semester, just so I could have the same free periods as you. Really? Really. I had to drop my favorite elective and take statistics instead, which I hate. But it was worth it to keep our study times. Mia turned her head slightly, and Tyler could feel her looking at him in the darkness. They were close enough that he could see the outline of her face, the way her hair had escaped from her bun and was falling across her cheek. "Why didn't you ever say anything?" she asked. "Why didn't you?" "I don't know. I guess I was scared it would make things weird between us. I didn't want to risk losing our friendship over something that might just be in my head." Tyler understood exactly what she meant. He'd had the same fears, the same worries about misreading the situation and ruining something good. "So it wasn't just in your head," Tyler said. "No," Mia said softly. "It wasn't just in my head." The space between them seemed to shrink even more. Tyler was acutely aware of every point where their bodies were touching, every breath Mia took, every small movement she made. "I've been wanting to ask you out for months," Tyler admitted. "Every Tuesday and Thursday, I'd tell myself I was going to do it. But then we'd start working on homework, and I'd lose my nerve. I kept hoping you would," Mia said. "I'd spend the whole walk to the library thinking about what I'd say if you asked. I had like 5 different responses prepared. What would you have said?" "Yes," Mia said immediately. "Definitely yes." Tyler felt his heart skip a beat. Here they were finally having the conversation they'd both been wanting to have for months. And it was happening in the most unexpected place imaginable. "So where does this leave us?" Tyler asked. "I don't know," Mia said honestly. "But I know I don't want to pretend this conversation never happened when we get back to school." "Me neither." They lay there quietly, both thinking about what this meant for their friendship, for their future study sessions, for everything. The wind outside was still rustling through the trees, but inside their small shared space, everything felt calm and warm and right. "Tyler," Mia said, "one more time." "Yeah. I'm really glad your packing skills are terrible," Tyler laughed, pulling her slightly closer. "Best mistake I ever made." For the first time all night, Tyler felt completely relaxed. Tomorrow, they'd have to figure out how to navigate this new development in their relationship. Tomorrow, they'd have to hike back to the real world and decide what came next. But tonight, they had this perfect moment of honesty and connection, wrapped up in a sleeping bag under a sky full of stars. Tyler woke up to the sound of birds chirping outside their tent. For a moment, he was confused about where he was. Then he felt the warmth of another person next to him, and everything from the night before came flooding back. Mia was still curled up against his chest, her breathing deep and peaceful. Her hair smelled like the campfire from last night, mixed with her usual shampoo. He lay there quietly, not wanting to wake her up yet. The morning light was filtering through the tent fabric, casting everything in a soft orange glow. It was the kind of perfect autumn morning that made you want to stay in bed forever, even when that bed was actually a sleeping bag on the hard ground. Tyler couldn't believe how much had changed in just one night. Yesterday, he and Mia had been study buddies who were too nervous to admit they liked each other. Now, after hours of honest conversation and shared confessions, everything felt different. Better, but also more complicated. Mia started to stir, making small, sleepy sounds that Tyler found incredibly endearing. She shifted slightly, then seemed to realize where she was and who she was pressed up against. Tyler felt her whole body tense for a moment. "Good morning," Tyler said softly. Mia turned her head to look at him, and Tyler was struck by how beautiful she looked first thing in the morning. Her hair was messy from sleep, and there were pillow marks on her cheek from the bunched-up jacket she'd been using as a pillow. But her eyes were bright, and when she smiled at him, Tyler felt that same flutter in his chest he'd been trying to ignore for months. "Good morning," she said back. "Did you sleep okay?" "Better than I expected," Tyler said honestly. "Same. I thought I'd be awake all night thinking about how weird this was, but I actually slept really well." They lay there for a few more minutes, neither one wanting to break the peaceful bubble they'd created. Outside, Tyler could hear the sounds of the forest waking up. Birds calling to each other, small animals rustling through the leaves. The distant sound of a stream they'd crossed yesterday during their hike. "I guess we should probably get up," Mia said eventually. "We've got that long hike back to the truck." "Probably," Tyler agreed, but neither of them made any move to actually get up. "Tyler," Mia said, her voice sounding a little uncertain. "About everything we talked about last night, ... I felt his heart skip. Was she having second thoughts? Had the light of day made her realize that their late-night confessions were a mistake? "What about it?" he asked, trying to keep his voice casual. "I just want to make sure it wasn't just because we were in this weird situation. I mean, people say things when they're scared or cold or whatever that they don't really mean." Ain't Tyler understood her concern. It would be easy to dismiss their conversation as something that happened because of the circumstances, because they were forced into an intimate situation and their emotions got carried away. "Do you think that's what happened?" Tyler asked. Mia was quiet for a moment, thinking. "No," she said finally. "I meant everything I said. I've been wanting to have that conversation with you for months. I just never had the courage." "Me too," Tyler said, feeling relieved. "Last night didn't create those feelings. It just finally gave us a chance to talk about them." Mia smiled, and Tyler could see the relief in her eyes too. "So what happens now?" That was the big question, wasn't it? They still had to hike back to Tyler's truck, drive back to campus, and figure out how to navigate this new development in their relationship. They had chemistry class together on Monday and their regular study session on Tuesday. Everything that had been simple and straightforward before was now loaded with new meaning. "I don't know," Tyler said honestly. "But I know I want to find out. I mean, if you do, I do," Mia said immediately. "I definitely do." They finally managed to extract themselves from the sleeping bag, which was just as awkward in reverse as it had been getting into it the night before. But this time, they were both laughing about it instead of dying of embarrassment. Getting dressed was still a little weird, but less weird than it had been the night before. They took turns changing while the other person organized their gear, and Tyler noticed that some of the nervous tension from yesterday had been replaced by a comfortable finesse. As they packed up their campsite, Tyler kept catching Mia looking at him with this small smile on her face. Every time their eyes met, she'd look away quickly, but not before Tyler saw the happiness there. "You know," Mia said as they were rolling up the sleeping bag, "we're probably going to have to tell this story to people someday." "What do you mean?" "I mean, if we actually start dating, people are going to ask how it happened. We're going to have to explain that it all started because you forgot to pack a second sleeping bag." Tyler laughed. "That's definitely not the romantic origin story I was hoping for. Are you kidding? It's perfect. It's like something out of a movie. Two friends get stranded in the wilderness and realize they're meant to be together. When you put it like that, it does sound pretty good." They started their hike back to the truck, and Tyler was amazed by how different everything felt. The same trail, the same trees, the same rocks they'd climbed over yesterday. But now, he was walking next to someone who wasn't just his study buddy or his friend. She was someone who liked him the same way he liked her, someone who had chosen to trust him with her feelings. About halfway back to the truck, Mia reached over and took Tyler's hand. It was such a simple gesture, but it made Tyler's heart race. They'd been pressed together all night long, but somehow holding hands felt like a bigger step. "Is this okay?" Mia asked. "More than okay," Tyler said, squeezing her hand gently. They walked the rest of the way like that, fingers intertwined, occasionally bumping shoulders when the trail got narrow. Tyler had never been happier to have such terrible packing skills. When they reached Tyler's truck, they both stood there for a moment, looking back at the trail they'd just hiked. Tyler knew they were both thinking the same thing, that this weekend had changed everything for them. "So," Tyler said as they loaded their gear into the truck, "want to grab breakfast on the way back? I know a place that makes amazing pancakes." "This our first official date?" Mia asked with a grin. "If you want it to be, I definitely want it to be." As they drove back toward campus, Tyler couldn't stop smiling. He kept glancing over at Mia, who was looking out the window with that same happy expression she'd had all morning. They talked about everything and nothing, their favorite breakfast foods, what they were going to tell their friends, whether they should still meet for their regular study session on Tuesday, Of course, we're still studying together, Mia said. Though it might be a little harder to concentrate now. Probably, Tyler agreed. But I think we can manage. By the time they reached the pancake place, Tyler had mentioned they were both completely comfortable with this new dynamic between them. The awkward nervousness from the night before had been replaced by excitement about what came next, as they sat across from each other in a booth, sharing stories and laughing over plates of pancakes. Tyler couldn't help but think that this was exactly how he'd always imagined a perfect first date would feel. Easy and comfortable and right. Thank you, Mia said suddenly. For what? For being terrible at packing, she said with a laugh, and for making last night feel safe instead of scary. Tyler reached across the table and took her hand again. Thank you for being brave enough to share that sleeping bag with me, and for telling me how you really felt. Best camping trip ever, Mia said. Definitely, Tyler agreed. Even if we didn't actually get to do any real camping. They both laughed, and Tyler knew that no matter what happened next, this would always be their story. The weekend when everything changed because of one forgotten sleeping bag and two people who finally found the courage to be honest with each other.